and it is another Friday edition of Relentless Learning. I'm your host, Larry Apke. Welcome to the guest today. I see my good friend Sasha Frumkin is in the green room. He's going to join us in a little bit, and looking forward to his talk on VUCA World. Before we get to that, I want to remind folks a little bit about what Relentless Learning is and talk a little bit about the sponsor, which is the VUCA MBA. So the Relentless Learning is an opportunity for us to spend a little bit of time every week together to learn some new things. And that's why we call it Relentless Learning. And during Relentless Learning, there's two big ideas that are presented every week. And this week, Sasha Frumkin is going to present the self-regulating system as the ultimate solution to the VUCA challenge. And I'm going to present a little bit about Project Aristotle. Some of you might be familiar with Project Aristotle, and it gave us a term or helped make famous a term called psychological safety. But in addition to psychological safety, there were some other things that they found out with this particular project, and I'm going to present on those today because I think it's important that we don't just understand psychological safety, though it is important, but we understand the other things that they found at Google about high-performing teams. Now, next week is December 22nd, coming close to the Christmas holiday, but we will persevere because I've convinced 4 folks to join us for a kind of special Christmas gift, if you will, a panel discussion on AI. Tom Malash, Aman Verma, Ian Nandra, and Steve Ropa, who were previous guests. It seemed that when we were going through this Relentless Learning, we talked a little bit about AI, so I invited them back to have a bit of a panel discussion, and I'm curious to see whether or not this would be something that folks would be interested in, and maybe we'll do more of it in the future. So stay tuned for that and join us next week. The Relentless Learning is sponsored every week by the VUCA MBA. And some folks are still asking the question, what does VUCA mean? Or what does VUCA stand for? It's an acronym that came to us from the military. VUCA itself means volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It is a way to describe our world these days. I think we all realize that the world is changing. I think we all realize that the world is moving faster and things are changing more quickly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the interesting thing about it is there are certain things you can do to not only survive in the VUCA world, but actually thrive in the VUCA world. And that's what the VUCA MBA is all about. Now, the MBA, we're not going to give you a master's of business administration. Some of you already have one anyway, don't need a second one. It stands for Mindset for Business Agility. Because what I have learned in my practice, and I've been doing this for a while, and I've worked with some fairly large companies, the household names that you'd be familiar with, Apple and Oracle and T-Mobile, et cetera. What I found is that in order for us to be not only, like I say, surviving in the VUCA world, but thriving in the VUCA world, we need to change our mindset. We need to understand what's different about the VUCA world. We need to embrace the VUCA world, and we need to know what can we do to not only survive but thrive in the VUCA world. So in the chat, or in the comments, I should say, it's not chat, it's in the comments, I have posted some links previous to this show, as I do always. There's a website if you're interested in the VUCA MBA. There's my email address. We have a mailing list, an email list that you can join, and we'll just send you a reminder who's talking this week, and that way you don't have to worry about it. So it'd be nice if you join that. I have a ton of stuff up on YouTube, and I continue to put more and more on there. We actually are starting to put these sessions on the YouTube channel, and also my big idea on a weekly basis. If you want to talk with me, I'm very passionate about it. You all get that. You can see in the background, my dog's passionate about it too. Anyway, there's a Calendly link. Just book some time. Let's sit down and chat about it. And there's also a bunch of testimonials because it's not just me saying that this stuff works or is important. There's a lot of other folks who are talking about it too, and I'd love for you to take a look at those. But I want to segue into what I'm referring to as my big idea for this week, because there's been a lot of talk on the show even recently about this term of psychological safety. And where does this term come from? Well, it doesn't come from Project Aristotle, which is a Google project to understand why some teams are more successful than others, basically. What do they have in common so that we can try to be more successful? And it makes a whole lot of sense in my book. And in 2012, they embarked on this thing that they called Project Aristotle to try to figure out what was the magic, the secret sauce, etc. The interesting thing personally for me is not long after this, I ran into a person, Matt Sakaguchi, at Google. I was doing my work with the nonprofit, the Job Hackers, which some of you are familiar with. We provided the Agile MBA for over 7 years for free to thousands of people worldwide. He was in the audience, and we got to know each other. And he actually presented a time or two at our meetup in the early days, the Job Hackers meetup. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. He had cancer, and there's a link to this Project Aristotle, by the way, in the comments that I put in for folks who want more information on it. But I used to joke with Matt. I used to say, you kind of spend a year out in the wilderness looking at what I call the usual suspects. It reminds me of the movie. And they started measuring things like what was the level of education of the people who were on successful teams versus unsuccessful teams? What degrees did they have? Were they introverts? Were they extroverts? How much did we pay them? What specialties did they have? How many years of experience did they have, et called et cetera? These are what I call the usual suspects. Now, I learned a long time ago from reading a book called Peopleware, that when we look at developers and their ability to write good code, these things aren't that important either. There were other things that were more important. So I always told them, I said, I could have saved you a bunch of money. Not that Google needs to save a bunch of money, but I could have saved you a bunch of money, because they started to look, after a year of not finding anything, they started looking at what some of us refer to as the soft skills. And the thing that came up a lot was this term psychological safety. And psychological safety actually comes to us from Amy Edmondson. I believe she's at Harvard. She studied this. And basically it is that you're in a group where you feel like you can be yourself. This is one thing companies always talk about. And, I take it with a grain of salt, but they talk about places where you can be your authentic self. And I love that term. I wish it were true everywhere. And so you can be yourself. So you feel that you can make a contribution. You will not be ridiculed. You will not be embarrassed or punished. That's the big one, but you feel like you can speak your mind. And interestingly enough, this works really well for the VUCA world, because in the VUCA world, we need feedback in order to be successful. And it's hard to understand the things in the VUCA world. And if we get more perspectives, we get closer to the truth, if there is an objective truth. And we need the psychological safety in order to do that. So that made a lot of sense. But that's not necessarily what I would call the big idea for today, though it is a big idea. And I know Sasha is big on it, and we'll talk about that when I bring him on stage. And it is a big thing. I worked at a company where every meeting, we spent a few minutes, and some of you in the Bay Area might be familiar with this, but we spent a few minutes basically addressing psychological safety, and had a thing that the meeting organizer would read at almost every meeting of, this is a safe space. We all feel free to say what we should say, what's on our mind, et cetera, et cetera. I don't remember the exact thing. I probably should, because Lord knows I said it a few times myself. And I thought it was kind of neat that at least there was an effort to address this concept of psychological safety, and it was kind of cool. But wasn't the only thing that they found. As they started to tease through the what I would consider the more soft skills during this Project Aristotle, and started to look, and they did a bunch of surveys with people, and they asked them questions, and that's generally how you find things out about soft skills. If you want to know what's going on with somebody, just ask it, right? They found 4 other things that were correlating with the high performing teams at Google. And these things are dependability, structure and clarity, meaning and impact. And the interesting thing for me, when I look at these 4 other things, they make sense too. And I think they lead us to, I think they're very much aligned in some ways with psychological safety. If we're going to feel safe, we need to make sure that we can depend on our teammates, that they're going to keep their word. I think this is very important, by the way, that people are good with their word. I think the word would be integrity. This is something I talk a lot about with my youngest boy, is that your word is sometimes the most important thing that you have. And it's very important to make sure you keep your word, that you're dependable. Because if not, then how do you trust people? Because I think a lot of this comes down to trust. And then structure and clarity. What is my role? What are my boundaries? That actually is counterintuitive, because it sounds like, we're putting limits on people. We're not putting limits necessarily. We're saying, here's where you're safe. These are the things that you can do. And that allows us not to have to always figure out what we can and cannot do. I've worked at many places. I'm sure a lot of you out there have worked at places like this. In fact, it's probably been almost every place I've worked. So I think it's probably pretty prevalent out there, where there isn't enough structure and clarity to understand what it is that you can and cannot do. So what do? Well, most people are going to say, hey, I'm not going to do anything, because I'd rather do nothing and not get penalized because I overstep my bounds than to do something and then find out later. That's the old saw of we don't ask for permission, we ask for forgiveness. Well, that gets old. Trust me, I'm the kind of person, I want to do the right thing no matter what. So a lot of times I have to ask for forgiveness afterwards. It would be nice if I knew what it is that I can and cannot do up front. The other things are really important to me as well, which is why in my training and when I'm working with people, I always talk about the why of things. I think the why of things is a big part of the agile world, at least for those who do a good job with coaching. And the why speaks a lot to the meaning. There's so many training programs, and this drives me nuts, that talk about the how. And there's so many places that I go where I want to talk about the why, and everybody just wants to ask me, what do I do with Jira? I can see Sasha laughing in the green room. And it just drives me nuts. Because if we understand the meaning of what we're doing and we understand why we're doing it, it actually is motivating for us in the VUCA world. Because the people who work in the VUCA world, for the most part, are what we classify as knowledge workers. And they're motivated completely differently. I've talked about it sometimes before. And then the impact that we have. It reminds me, before I see my time is dwindling down, it reminds me of a story that I heard about workers at a nursing home. And the reason that I paid attention to it, believe it or not, fun fact about me, when I was a much younger man, I was a licensed nursing home administrator in the state of Arizona. It was one of my previous careers. And they interviewed people who worked in housekeeping. The interesting thing about the people who worked in housekeeping is that there was a hierarchy of people in nursing homes, which there is. They're generally at the bottom. It's the toughest work. It's the lowest paid work. But here's the thing. They spend more time with the families than probably anyone else, because the nurses are too busy and of course the administrators are too busy, etc. And they asked some of the people about their job, and the people who weren't engaged in their work and who didn't do a very good job, they said, my job is to clean up after people, as if it were a bad thing. But there was a group of people who not the residents, but the families of the residents loved. And these were people who said, my job is to make sure that when the families come in here, that they have a nice, clean place where they can interact with their loved ones. They're providing meaning, not only to their own job, but meaning to the people that they work with. And it was so powerful for me. And that's why, just to kind of wrap this up, the way that we view the world is so important. And I always talk about the way we view the world being important. Because if we understand the meaning of our work and the impact that we have, it changes what we do. It engages us. And that's one of the reasons why I know my meaning and impact in the world. And I know this is why I get so excited about ideas and things like Agile. Anyway, my time is done. I don't want to take too much away from Sasha today. Hey, there he is. Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to present at your event. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. We're very happy to have you. And there's the personal reason I'm happy to have you is you and we know each other for a little while. I can tell you something nice about Sasha before I even get into the thing. I ran the nonprofit, the Job Hackers, for years, and Sasha came to me, it's probably a couple of years ago, and said, "Hey, look, I'm providing this training, this Scrum Master training, CSM training, I believe it is, right? CSM, CSPO, whatever certification, and you know, we're going to help provide it to some of your people at low or no cost." And I don't know, Sasha, how many people from the Job Hackers have gone through some of your training? It's been quite a few, hasn't it?
I believe by this time we are talking about maybe 400 or more, because
Wow.
I still have a few people in my classes from Job Hackers. They are not private classes anymore, but even in the time when it was just private classes, was about 400.
That's amazing, and we certainly appreciate that on behalf of the Job Hackers. Even though I'm no longer there, I know the Job Hackers appreciate it. I know you continue to work with them. You're here in the Bay Area. You've been working here for a while. I looked through your bio, and you describe yourself as a recovering developer and Scrumaholic, which I love. And you also talk about your professional life making a dramatic turn in 2007. That's some time ago. You had a privilege to learn the Agile Manifesto and XP from Martin Fowler, who was one of the 17 founding fathers of the Manifesto. And you do a lot of training these days. I think is that the A2Z Agility company that you're running?
Well, I'm still not a certified trainer yet. I'm working toward that. And Scrum Alliance keeps the plank really, really high to become a certified trainer. I have to do a lot of co-trainings. So I have a privilege to co-train my classes with a lot of great people like Jeff McKenna, like Bernie Maloney, Serge Dmitriev. I'm doing a lot of co-trainings these days, and I'm looking forward to nail my certification in New Orleans in May this year.
That's great. And we're going to ask you a favor from the show. I know Jeff a little, and I know Bernie a little bit. When next time, if you talk to him, say, "Hey, look, we'd love to have him come on as a guest of the show." So I'm going to put you on the spot there, but we would love to have them. Only got a few more minutes here. I don't want to shortchange the bio piece, but we always ask our guests, do you have anything in particular you want to talk about or promote about yourself that's going on these days other than that training that we talked about?
I also have a user group. This was probably the longest online user group. It started back in 2017. That time it was probably one of the first online user groups when everybody was still meeting face to face. We have more than 1,100 followers these days. The name of this group is Agile Practitioner Online Special Interest Group. I will send you the link to the meetup group, so that it would be great if you could spread the word. We are always welcome new guests, and we are always welcome new speakers. So please join us. And if you want to present, ping me, and I'll be happy to include you as a guest speaker.
That's great. We've got a lot of guests here, by the way. I invited a whole bunch of people, and I wanted them to not only see this particular one, but some people who might be potential guests on this show. So there you go. You've got two opportunities between being a guest on this show and Sasha's meetup. So today you're going to talk about self-regulating systems as ultimate solution to the VUCA challenge. What's going to happen? You've seen this before, but I'm going to get out of the way, and you've got about 10 minutes to present. And then after that, I want the folks who are listening, whether it be my big idea or Sasha's or anything that you have on your mind, you can put questions or comments in the comment section, and we'll address those after Sasha is done with his presentation. So without further delay, Sasha, I'm going to hand it over to you. And I'm going to add, you have a presentation.
Let's postpone the presentation till a little bit later. Thank
Okay.
you. I will,
you let me know, and I'll add it when it's time, and you can tell me when to move
yes,
slides
thank
or
you.
whatever you need to do. Okay, I'm going to get out of the way. I'll see you. I'll see you
you.
on the other side.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, folks, for joining us today. So we live in a very interesting world. It's interesting time because the spirit of recession is in the air. Companies like Cisco, for example, let go about 600,500 people. Salesforce let go about 10% of their workforce. So the world is in turmoil. All VUCA factors are growing up exponentially, and people become more and more uncomfortable with that. In this world of complexity and uncertainty, you would probably expect people to be turning more towards sense and respond. This is what we are supposed to do in the complex world. Unfortunately, the muscle memory kicks in, and a lot of people are going back to old-fashioned command and control, plan and predict. So, for example, they let go a lot of agile people. Companies like Capital One, I think they let go all their agile people, and they're going back to command and control. I'm not sure this is the right approach in this kind of a situation. What I would like to share with you is the idea that actually I learned from Bjart Bognes from Norway. He was talking about that in a context of the budgeting, but I think that could be used, this metaphor could be used in much more wider context. So let's take a look at the traffic light. Larry, can you please bring the presentation? Thank you. So if you want to have a control over the situation, let's take a look at the traffic problem. Managing traffic using the traffic lights. That seems to be pretty straightforward. You have your red light, people stay, cars stay. You put your green light, the cars and people are going, and yellow is all in between. Seems to be pretty straightforward, and a lot of people feel comfortable with that. Unfortunately, this system has a substantial limitations. Somebody has to put certain algorithms to control the traffic light. And it does not matter how adaptive these algorithms are, they're still not completely flexible, and they always have to be predetermined. For example, I used to be riding a motorcycle, and I could easily spend a long time standing in front of the red light because the system just could not see me, could not be aware of my presence. In the meanwhile, there is another approach for traffic regulation that is called roundabout. Unfortunately, it's not very common in the United States, but it's kind of a system very used in Europe. In this case, there is nobody in control except people who are directly involved. It is all the decisions made ad hoc by the people who are directly involved in this problem of controlling the traffic. Uh, so the first model seemed to be a good representation of the classical plan and predict, command and control. While the second model, roundabout, is a great representation of the self-regulated system. So on the one hand, a straightforward command and control, everything is clear, everything is predetermined. On the other hand, we have this self-regulated system where the traffic members have to identify the right of way for each other based on eye contact, based on certain kind of collaboration, and it's completely up to the humans involved into the traffic. Here comes a question. On the next slide, you will see probably the most challenging intersection of the world. This is in Paris. That's a Charles de Gaulle square in Paris, where you have an intersection of 8 different streets. 8 streets. And there are 6 lanes. Now, I would invite you to think, would you consider putting traffic lights to control this traffic on this square? I unfortunately cannot see the chat, but it would be interesting to see if anybody would potentially foresee a traffic light to regulate this kind of traffic. And by the way, it was one of my bucket list items to drive over this square. One is to drive in Italy, in Rome, and the second one is to drive over the Charles de Gaulle square. And I had a chance to experience it myself. It works like a champ. I was able to go around the square, join the traffic, leave the traffic, no problem, no traffic lights whatsoever. I'm using these examples to make it apparent for you folks. And I would also bring it when I talk to the company executives to educate them that command and control system, plan and predict, does not work in the complex world. It does not work well in the VUCA world. Moreover, the more VUCA factors are grown, the less it's going to be working. It will cause nothing but chaos. When we are dealing with the complex problems, when we are dealing with the VUCA factors, the only solution that you could consider is a self-regulated system like it is represented by the roundabout regulation system. And this example of the Charles de Gaulle square could be the best example and the best argument for that. With this said, I would probably, does not work. We have some some technical difficulties. So Larry, with this said, I would go back to get it back to you. Maybe if you have any questions in the chat. You're on mute.
I was on mute. Sasha, I appreciate that. It's a wonderful example. My lovely wife, Jana, said, hey, great example. She's a big fan of Paris. I'm sure there's some folks out there who are.
And again, I want to give credit to Bjart Bognes. I learned about this example from him. I just use it in a different context. All the kudos to Bjart.
Great. I appreciate that. And it's always good to talk about the folks who help lead us here. We all stand on the shoulders of some giants out there. So For those folks who are live with us now, you can put your questions in the comments. I certainly have a few. Um, I want to start with, I mean, it's a great big idea, right? We need to create self-regulating systems. Um, in Europe, we have. I mean, I spent some time in Europe too, and roundabouts. At first, they scared me, and then after a while, I saw it. We actually have a couple here in Burlingame, but not many. Um, I want to know the why, or at least your thinking behind the why. Why is it that when it comes to, we'll just start with roundabouts because it is a better idea. It's objectively better. We know this. We can study it. Why are we so far behind in this country? Do you have a hypothesis on that?
It's difficult for me to say because I have my European background and I got accustomed to roundabouts, driving around them. But in general, and we had this conversation with a few of our agile friends, by default, people are uncomfortable with uncertainty. People are more comfortable with everything is already predetermined, where you could just follow the instructions and don't have to think about that. People are uncomfortable with uncertainty. And if you take a look at what's going on in our world, because of all this uncertainty, because the whole planet is in turmoil, you could see how politicians that are offering simple solution for the complex problems are gaining a lot of popularity.
Yeah.
People are not comfortable with uncertainty.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, and so maybe you can help me out here because here I am trying to sell courses that say, hey, become a little bit more comfortable with uncertainty, or at least understand it and learn how to do it. So help me, in some respects, sell this VUCA idea and this concept of being comfortable with uncertainty. What do you tell people?
Well, I'm a big believer in a Kinevin sense making model.
Hmm.
As you could see, I made some hidden references to it. It was my big aha moment when I learned about this, thanks to Peter Green, who helped me to understand it with a few very simple activities, group activities.
Yeah.
And one thing that really stood out for me is a cliff, a cliff between the complex domain and house.
Hmm.
Because very often people are coming in and trying to use their best practices that are applicable only for the obvious domain.
Hmm.
They try to bring them to the complex domain. Say, hey, people, you have to use your best practices. And when you are try to do that, that's exactly what happens. You fall from the cliff into the house.
Mm. The
Uh,
for those who, I'm sorry to interrupt, Sasha. For those who don't know, Cynefin is a concept that comes to us from David Snowden. He's an ex IBM guy. He basically said that all the work that we can do falls into one of four major quadrants, and what Sasha was referring to is the two of the quadrants we're most interested in, or you referred to three actually, the simple and the obvious, is the complicated and the complex. Now, um, for those of you who are not that keen with it, it's one of the ideas that I'm hoping to present in the future as well when we talk about this. But I just wanted to give some background to that. Um, so that helped you to have the aha moment. And this is funny that you mentioned that, by the way, because when I look back on the aha moments and the things that helped me in my practice to understand that, Cynefin was one of the big ahas for me as well. And I think it is for a lot of people. So again, I'll present maybe a little bit more on it in the future. But we were talking in the green room. I've got something from Ian, and we're going to maybe go through in a second here, but I want to finish this thought. We were talking about psychological safety, and you said you wanted to talk a little bit about that. I don't think we actually got the chance on your intro, so I want to give you a chance before we get to Ian's comment question.
Okay, great. Because my personal mission is to unleash creativity and happiness by bringing psychological safety to the workplace. I really appreciate when you said that you usually start a conversation at each meeting, reminding people that it is a safe place so that people could feel more empowered. There is a technique that I've learned, and this is something that I always use with my teams. It's called the failure bow. I failed. How fascinating! By showing that uh, you kind of release some of your power, because
Mm,
people sometimes feel like as a coach or trainer or even a scrum master, you have some power. It is even more powerful if somebody with a high paycheck could do
mm,
this in front of a big group of people.
mm,
One day, I remember, was able to. Uh, I don't want to use the word convince, but uh, we made this as a common plan with the CTO of the big company, and he performed a failure bow in front of 80 people that were well known for notorious analysis paralysis.
mm,
That was the effect of the exploded bomb. Like 80 pair of eyes were widely open, 80 jars were on the floor. If he can do that, it means I can do that.
mm.
Next week, they managed to solve a couple of big problems that they could not solve for a long time. So it
Yeah,
works. It actually works.
yeah. So,
It helps you to come in as a vulnerable human. It shows
yeah,
your vulnerability. It
yeah,
also helps, and every time you want to start a difficult conversation, you want people to start it with a smile. This is one of my favorite tools, coaching tool. It's little
mm,
elephant in the room. You show this and people start smiling. Okay, now we are open to have a difficult conversation.
yeah. I think that's great. I think that humility is a big one, and when we see humility from our leaders, we see vulnerability from our leaders. Is really important in this VUCA world because people do follow it. And I say the same thing. You're talking about leaders and simple solutions. I mean, my training I talk about it all the time. It's just amazing how we fall for it. I talk about it in terms of our and other things because we do have this wiring for certain things, and one of them is to be attracted to people who have answers, even in a world where there's not really answers. Anyway, so Ian's was more of a comment than a question. So basically, Ian is our machine intelligence, human intelligence guy, and he's going to be joining us next week on the AI chat. And he's basically saying, hey, look, AI can help us with some of this stuff. Because I think he plugged it into his friend Hal, and we got a quote back out the other end. But we do have, other than a comment, we have a question from my good friend Charlie Triplett, and he's saying, we have any key metrics to highlight the self-regulating systems versus the command and control systems?
Interesting. I was never thinking about that because mm, it's very difficult. I believe it's more qualifiable than quantifiable. So I would probably go and set up some kind of a survey,
Mm.
and that would also be a good measurement of the psychological safety as well. A survey that could indicate if people feel like they could uh, be involved in decision making
Well,
and
I
feel
think
safe.
I think what I think what Charlie's talking about is more the Charles de Gaulle square of the self-regulating system versus the command and control system, and what metrics we would look at. Now, I can imagine metrics for that particular one, which is number of cars per hour, fewer
Yeah,
accidents, et cetera, et cetera.
that would be like throughput, like number of accidents, but that is something that easy to measure. When it comes to the real human system, and maybe what we could do the same. We could measure the lead time for major decisions.
Yeah, well, and John is saying happiness for the key team members. I know. I think it's Crisp does that. It's a group. I think if I got the name right, out of Scandinavia, will do that
Yeah.
on a regular basis. I think another thing that I is big for me, and we've talked about it on the show, is I'm a big value delivery guy. I think we can start to measure the value. Um, and the other thing too is not looking for input so much, but looking for outputs and even more outcomes. What are the outcomes? What is our goal? What are we trying to achieve? What really makes a difference? Well, in the roundabout, it's safety and speed, and product development. It's probably value and time are two of the big ones there. Um, but there's a lot that we could, but I think it's looking at and tell me if you agree. I think it's looking at the problem differently.
Well, I'm usually very accurate when it comes with the metrics because you get what you measure. It
Yeah.
always reminds me how at my early years at Autodesk, one really smart manager decided to measure the performance of the programmers by counting the lines of code we produced.
Right.
Very smart decision. You
Yeah.
get what you measure.
Yeah. Well, you certainly get what you incentivize too, but
Yeah.
measurements themselves become incentives, right?
Yeah.
This is what people pay attention to because you're saying, hey, look, focus on this. And incentives help us focus, and whatever you focus on, tends to get done, right? Um, the interesting thing for me is when we talk about individuals, when we talk about organizations, we have a tendency to fall into, as you mentioned, these command and control structures and things of that nature. Um, the interesting thing for me is if you said ask somebody who didn't know anything about roundabouts, I'm gonna blow up this metaphor a little bit. Are stoplights successful? I think their answer is going to be yes.
Well, because they don't know anything else. We
Exactly.
have to, we have to give people credit because if they don't know anything else, they might be out of options. And I believe that we as coaches, as agilists, we should open people's eyes and give them or show them that there are better options. We are
Right.
still uncovering the better ways.
Uncovering the better ways, of course, and it's an active thing. But this comes down to the crux, and maybe the last question. I don't see anything else now in the comments. From my standpoint, this is kind of the holy grail of agile coaching session. Okay, I'll get to it later, but Charlie's got one really quickly I want to put up there. Um, are there examples of self-regulating system being experimented with in a traditional command and control enterprise?
Uh, as far as I know, and I read an article about that. I forgot where exactly. There was in one of the UK cities. They decided to replace a roundabout with only three streets. They decided to replace it with traffic light systems. They ended up installing 42 traffic lights with
Mm,
the with the with the cars for the pedestrians. That was pretty expensive thing, and the throughput actually went down about 30 to 40%.
yeah. Yeah, it's good that they have these experiments and this data. I want to get back to this one last point because it's always been something that bugged me and bugged other agile coaches. We didn't get a chance to talk to it. It's this concept of I know the street light, but I don't know the roundabout. But I don't. How do I get the people who don't know about the roundabout to even pay attention to what I have to say in the first place? That seems to be like the holy grail of agile coaching is the first step of the 12-step program, right? Is to get people to admit they have a problem.
Um, I would probably address these people to one of the my favorite books John Kotter, Leading Change. It all starts with a sense of urgency. And by the way, these slides that I showed you, they are a part of a bigger presentation that I made with one of my clients. And the name of that presentation was Business as Usual equals Out of Business.
Excellent.
You start with sense of urgency. And only when people have this sense of urgency, even only when they feel like their rear end is on fire, then they would be receptive to learn about alternative ways of running business.
Perfect. I'll let that be the last word, Sasha, because we're running out of time here. I want to be respectful of your time. I know you got something to do after this. I want to remind people we're here every Friday. Next week, we're going to do a panel discussion, which will be something new. So we'll see. It might be a kind of an experiment, and with experiments could be a failure. So it could be fun to watch, just like a burning building or a traffic accident. But hopefully you'll join us for the holidays. And I appreciate your time today, Sasha, and look forward to seeing you and interacting with you, and appreciate all you do for the Agile community. Everybody, please have a wonderful and safe weekend, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting.